Hi, my name's Wayne Butler, and I'm an alcoholic. Grateful to be here. Good to be sober. I love AA. Thank you for the invite, Ali, and thank you for the intro, Rana. Yeah, I think that's the first time I've ever been introduced like that. I kind of like that. It's kind of cool. Welcome anybody who might be new. If you're new in this room, I understand if you're counting days, so am I. I'm sober 22 days today, plus 6 months and 45 years. But I just wanted to count days with you for a minute. My sobriety date is November 8th, 1977. I've had no booze, pills, powders, posters, or lotions from that day to this. However, I did have a history of dating, mind, and mood altering women, but I don't do that no more because I don't want to be sentenced to another program. I can handle barely one. And the same could be said of me, by the way. I don't want to be one-sided on that. I know I wasn't exactly a crackerjack when I was out there in my madness. Now, I know the topic is step 11, but I need to put some context to it, I believe, some background. I can go right into it, and I could spend the entire 40 minutes talking about step 11. I love it so much. But I want to give a little history behind why it became so important to me. I'd already been using the Bible. I don't want to offend anybody's sensibilities, but I love the Bible, but it's not a program of recovery from alcoholism. I want to add that too. I made the mistake of thinking it could be the program of recovery. For some, it may be, but for me, it was not a program of recovery. I think that's why the higher power brought Bill and Bob together, because he knew a knucklehead like me needed an approach that I would listen to, that I could hear, that the words would not send me skyrocketing in an act of defiance. And so I just want to get it out there. I love that book, but I want to tell you, I'm a recovered big book thumper. I want to tell you that. What I mean by that is I used to hit newcomers in the head with it if they didn't listen. I don't do that no more. I've kind of plighted it down a little bit. But what led me to the 12 and 12 and to the way that I practiced the 11th step and the way I've been practicing the 11th step for the past 35 years, I want to give you what led up to that, because I believe it was a miracle that led me up to that. And I want to make a point. I did not say I'm the miracle. I don't believe for a hot second I'm a miracle. I believe that I've experienced miraculous results because of this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, and that spark that was lit between Bill and Dr. Bob that led to this moment that I get to share with you guys tonight. It's a moment that I'll cherish. It's an honor and a privilege for me to be given the responsibility of attempting to carry this message. A lot of my posse is here. A lot of my sponsees. I see my grand sponsee, Marissa, came in. I don't want to miss anybody. I'm not going to start naming. But, you know, it's an honor for me to have the sponsees and the grand sponsees that I have. Some people think it's kind of hokey to have a sponsorship family, but, you know, my first grand sponsor was a guy named Clarence Schneider, and I got to meet him in my second year of sobriety. He was the home brewmeister in the first edition, the first guy to leave Oxford Group, as a matter of fact. And I don't say that for any kind of commendation or any type of I'm special. It's just that there's a lineage. Everybody has a link back to Bill W. And I think that's pretty impressive. I think that's pretty important to know where I come from and where I've gone to. But I want to get to it. I'm an alcoholic. And what that means is when I want to quit drinking, I can't. And when I need to control it, I can't. That's what makes me alcoholic. That's so I could stop talking about it right there, but it'd be boring, wouldn't it? It's like it'd be boring. It's sort of like boring like this. December 30th of last year, I broke my hip. And I want to tell you that I was in a martial arts competition for the Senior Olympics, and I was kicking this guy's butt really good. And I threw a roundhouse kick at him, and he caught it, and he dropped me, and I went off the mat and hit the hard floor, and it broke my hip. Now that's a good story, but it's not true. I fell. That's what I did. I fell. But that's boring. That's kind of lame, kind of boring. I've never let the truth stand in the way of a good story is what I'm trying to tell you. But I'm going to tell the truth tonight to the best of my ability. I came to AA. I was a mess, like most of us, I suppose. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I was a child of the church. I love church. I have no problem with religion at all. I know some people have a problem with religion for something that may have happened to them. But I think in most religions and most churches, it's kind of good, I think. I think many people benefit from it. Millions of people benefit from their beliefs. And I want to support that, whatever works for them. And I know a lot of good people out there in the earth world in my 45 years, 6 months, and 22 days. I've got to meet lots of God's kids out there, and they live a really good life. They take care of their bills. They pay their bills. They raise their kids as best they can. They're modern, they're happy for whatever happy is. They're happy on the natch, and they don't need 12 steps. 10 commandments is good enough for them. I'm a little sicker than them. I need 12 steps. and 12 traditions and 12 concepts. But I don't want to get lost in the weeds on that. You know, I look back, and it's only by God's grace that after the psychiatric wards I've been put in, and I have to tell you, I'm not trying to be different. I'm not an alcoholic and anything, and I'll tell you why. I've learned that anything that separates me or divides me has the potential to defeat me. And it's like, and I'm a guy who's always looking for differences and trying to find I don't find the similarities. I don't know why that is. I just think that's a nuance with the ism factor, I suppose. I always try to do prayer and meditation, but I have a racing mind. Does anybody else have a racing mind? Raise your racing hand up there if you had a racing mind at some point in your life. My mind was like a dog track, and it was just always on the move. Science tried to medicate that away from me, but it just didn't work. And I give them E for effort. Science and medicine has tried to fix Wayne Butler since he was 9 years old, and God bless him for trying. But Bill wrote a part in part B that is brilliant. He said, probably no human power could relieve me of my alcoholism. And I want to focus on one word, probably. That gets dropped almost all the time. But to see that word is, I think, the single most important part of that sentence, that probably no human power. And I want to share this, and it links to step 11 later. I'm just going to plug it in there now. That probably no human power. Folks, the human powers of medicine, psychiatry, psychology, sociology, theology, pharmacology, and talk therapy at one time or another all tried to relieve me one way or another of my alcoholism. But folks, they failed miserably. And I don't know why. I didn't know why they were failing. Man, I wanted their help. I just didn't know what was wrong with me. My mind and my emotions were terrible. And it's like, I didn't understand it. And I've had 21 psychiatric diagnoses since the age of 9. I've been medicated from the age of 9 to the age of 27 on top of my drinking, trying to find out what's wrong with this Wayne Butler guy. And you know what? Many times they thought they had the right beat on me, and they give me this pill or that pill, and that would wear out within weeks. And nope, that's not it. And then they try again. You know, science is a practice, isn't it? And I didn't know the reason they couldn't relieve me of my alcoholism is because they're limited. Science is limited to the study of the physical realm. They're not able to study the spiritual realm. We don't study it either. We experience it. And that's why when I'm with you guys, it's like as I was up in here talking to Calvin one-on-one, here's what happens with Alki math. 1 = 3. When we're in this room and we are talking about God and AA, God comes in. He's the third. He's the power part. And so me and Calvin at that point are not human power. Calvin and I are spiritual power at that point in time. And with that spiritual power, things can be changed within me. So I don't want newcomers to misunderstand what that sentence means, probably no human power. Because when I'm talking about, when it's all about Wayne B and self-will, that's when I'm running on self-power. And that's going to fail me. But when I'm in this room and I'm talking about Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm with you, we go from human power to spiritual power. And I think that's something important for the newcomers to know, because I've heard newcomers dismiss the need for sponsorship because of that one statement. That's a human power, but that's not true in my opinion, in my experience. And so I just wanted to get that out, and I'll link that into the 11th step when I get to it. So as I've gone along and with all these problems I came in with, I tell you, when I took 3 Budweisers, I didn't know this, but I went from being a 0 to hero in 3 drinks. And I've always wanted to be a hero. I always want to save somebody's life. And then I did, and it wasn't enough. When they pinned those medals on me, it wasn't enough. It's like going from 0 to hero only lasts for a split second. And then I wonder what's next, because I feel so bad about myself and I don't know why. And the only thing that seems to fix that is something that shouldn't fix that. Budweiser shouldn't fix that. That shouldn't work. Alcohol's, specifically ethanol alcohol, does one thing. It's a central nervous system suppressant. But you see, that even defies logic and it defies science. Because when it's a central nervous system suppressant, that means it's supposed to sedate me. I don't know about you, but you give me a few drinks and I'll dance naked. I'll get on a bar and I'll know everything at the bar. It's like, I'll be your hero for a week. I just like, it's an amazing, alcohol's not supposed to do that. And I think that's an unusual effect. And I have to find a power greater than that I can come to believe in, because I think the faith requires belief and experience and action, so that it will go from my head to my heart. I remember when I was being a smart guy with my sponsor, we were talking about the 12 steps. We were reading how it works. He got to the point where here are the steps we took. So I snarkily said, well, sponsor, where'd they took them? And he says, boy, you are stuck on stupid. I'll tell you where they took them. They took them to heart. And that took my hair with it, went right over my head, took my hair. I didn't know what he meant. And now I'm a prayer. I was a meditator. I would sit and I would think bad thoughts. I know that ain't the right kind of meditation, but once I started thinking and I got quiet, if I could ever get quiet, that my thoughts would turn dark and negative. I seemed to have no power over that. And I needed power for that. And Budweiser provided a faulty power for me. And I didn't know that until I got into AA. And you wise guys that knew, that got wised up through the 12 steps and who learned the history. See, I didn't know. I want to tell you a quick story. At 7 years of sobriety, I'm doing everything you're supposed to do in the big book, in the rooms. I'm doing everything you can do, and I'm getting worse. I'm getting worse by the day. I'm waving guns at people in meetings. I'm sponsoring my sponsees through attrition. I'm threatening them with their lives if they don't do the steps. And my sponsor would take my guns away. And I'm not a tough guy, so I'm not being a tough guy. But this is the madness that was in my mind. And so when I was 5 years sober, my wife ran off with my sponsee, and I was going to commit homicide. And I went to my sponsor's trailer, and I took my gun with me. I don't know, that's stupid to do that, but I did. And he says to me, he says, "What are you so mad about?" And I said, "Didn't you hear what I just told you?" He says, "Yeah, I heard. Why are you so mad?" And now I'm thinking he's going over there and getting some of the action too. I'm suspecting everybody. I'm 5 years sober, going to meetings every day, sponsoring 15 guys, doing everything you can do. But there's one thing. Here's the question I never stopped asking myself. But what's really wrong with me? Okay, I'm alcoholic, but why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? I know a lot of people that are alcoholic and they don't think like I think. They don't feel like I feel after they stop drinking. I just couldn't get past. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And so my sponsor says to me, he says, "Well, your sponsee warned you, didn't he?" And I said, "What?" He said, "He warned you. Didn't he, when he asked you to sponsor him, didn't you ask him why? And didn't he say he wanted what you had?" Well, bingo, there it is. He wanted what you had, and it appears he was serious about it. I didn't think that, he busted out laughing. I didn't see a thing funny about that at all. And then he says, by the sounds of your story, he was willing to go to any lengths to get it. He would just thought it was hilarious. And you know what? I found myself cracking up with him. That was one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic in a way that he understood that would get my attention. See, we know, don't we? We know. And an alcoholic of our type can gain the confidence of another sick and sorry alcoholic just by sharing our experience. I can't share theirs, but I can share mine. And those are one of the lessons that Barney taught me. So at 7 years of sobriety, Barney said to me, I was getting ready to go back on medication because somebody in the room decided to play doctor. And they told me in confidence that I should go see a psychiatrist, that I'm dangerous and that I need to go back on medication. And because I didn't know what to do, I listened to this person who's playing doctor in AA. And I went to see a psychiatrist. And the first thing that psychiatrist said, "I know your story." And the first thing he did was prescribe medication. Only took him an hour to do that. Prescribed 3 minutes. I'm not giving an opinion on medication, so please don't tell people I am. This is my personal experience. And so he gave me three samples. He diagnosed me bipolar, manic depressive with a chemical imbalance. That's 7 years sober, folks. And I don't blame him, because he was diagnosing me according to my symptoms that I was telling him about. You see, you got to remember, his diagnosis is 90% based on what I tell him. And I'm a terrible symptomatic reporter. My skill set is not all that good. I'm looking for sympathy, so I'm going to give you the worst side of me that you're ever going to see. And so he gave me 3 medication samples before I filled the prescription. And one was amitriptyline. Now, I've heard that medication because my mom used to take that for PMS. So I wondered why they were giving it to me. I'm a man. I do not have PMS. But I found out it was an antidepressant. And then he gave me I forget, it was a salt tablet. I forget what the name of that was. And then he prescribed a new drug in 1984 called Prozac. Now, folks, I didn't take them. Now, listen, I'm heading right into step 10 or step 10 and 11. I don't want you to think I'm going to get lost in the weeds here. So I went and he gave me and here's something interesting that happened when I was leaving the doctor. By the way, I didn't call my sponsor before I went to see the psychiatrist. I just want you to know that. And so he gave me samples of all 3 medications in a paper bag. And as I picked up the paper bag to leave his office, my shoulders dropped. I relaxed. And I knew that shouldn't have happened because I hadn't taken them yet. I shouldn't have got any relief from them tablets at all because I hadn't taken them yet. But just the idea I was going to take something made me relax. And that's when I called my sponsor. And me and my sponsor met the next day. And he says, bipolar, schmipolar. I don't know, maybe you are, I don't know. But I've known you the whole time you've been sober. And here's something that's interesting. You have never, with all your step work, you have never stopped asking me, but what's really wrong with you? And I've had many people say to me, sober, Butler, what's wrong with you? And I want to sock them, because if I can answer that question, I can do something about it. And I just don't know. And I've turned that big book inside and out and just can't find the answers for me. And then here's something my sponsor said. He says, here's what I suggest. He says, I heard that Bill Wilson character suffered from depression and anxiety deep into his sobriety, but he recovered fully. He says, that's what I heard. That's not what I was hearing. You know, you got to watch out for gossip, people. Gossip has the power to kill. You got to watch out for that, because I was very susceptible, and they were telling me these bad things about Bill Wilson that they couldn't possibly have known, because he was dead before they got sober. But I was listening to it, because that's what we do when we don't know. We listen to whatever we can. I'm a sponge. And I just didn't know. And so Barney says to me, but what I've heard is that he recovered fully. He says, why don't you go find out what he did to do that? Now, I've been doing the 10 paragraphs on step 11. I want you to hear that. 10 paragraphs on step 11 in the big book. And I neglected to remember that Bill wrote in the page 164, we realize we know only a little. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. And of course, God did disclose more to you and us, and you can read about it in the 12 and 12 and our history book, AA Comes of Age. He says, so why don't you go do some research and find out what Bill Wilson did to overcome his depression? And folks, I did that. I stumbled onto it. I found this history about Bill's work with Father Ed Dowling. And that's a critical name if you don't know it. Father Ed Dowling, there's a book called Soulless Sponsorship. It's not an AA approved book, but it's a book that details Father Dowling's he's a non-alcoholic, his relationship with Bill Wilson. Now, he was Bill Wilson's spiritual advisor, but Bill called him sponsor. And that's because, you know, he's a little bit defiant. Bill was in a terrible depression. He was being gossiped about and character assassinated in AA. That was written about that. He wrote about that, as he was heartbroken by that. He didn't understand it. And Father Dowling was that Jesuit out of St. Louis. He met him after the big book was published. Father Dowling wanted to meet the man that wrote those pages, because Father Dowling knew that book had to be spiritually inspired. He knew that Bill didn't just sit down and write that book. He knew that the higher power intervened with Bill when he wrote those pages, because he realized he knew only a little, and yet he laid out a template, a blueprint that was sustained for now almost 88 years for us. And I think that's magnificent. And so I did that research. I was walking around on the outskirts of Chicago trying to figure out, where do I start? Barney said, I don't know where you ought to start. Why don't you just ask God for help? So in my prayer and meditation, I asked God to help me. And I'm walking around and I'm looking for a yard sale. Now, I don't know many of you guys, I'm sure you have yard sales where you are. I don't know what you call them in other countries. But when I don't know what to think, I go to a yard sale because I want to spend money. I just want to spend much. And I go to this estate sale and I see this galvanized tub tilted up like this. And inside is this Webster's electronic wire. It was a wire recording device. Back in the 40s, they recorded voice on wire. And there were 6 spools of wire, and there was this wire, and this recorder was broken. So they said, and there was a bunch of papers in the bottom. And they said I could have that for $5 if I wanted it. And I knew my brother could fix it. Whatever it was, my brother was a whiz with that. So I knew he could fix it. So I bought it for $5. What do you got to lose? I didn't read the papers. I just bought the tub of stuff. I took the tub home, emptied it out, and brought the tub back. And my brother fixed it. And you know what it was? It was a recording of Bill Wilson. It was a recording of Dr. Bob. It was a recording of Dr. Harry Tebow. It was a recording of Dr. Silkworth. Different recordings they made related to the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous. What's the chances of me finding something like that? I didn't know that the guy that lived there who died, and it was an estate sale, I didn't know he was one of the founding members of AA Chicago. I didn't know. What do I know? I just bought a $5 tub of stuff. But here it turns out, and by the way, I donated. I'm happy to report I donated it to the New York Archives. If I'd have known what it'd be worth today, I probably would have kept it, but I donated before I found out. But in those papers was correspondence between Bill Wilson and the guy that lived there. And this was 1970 that the letters were noted. And they wrote, him and his neighbor wrote Bill Wilson, how have you been able to live with your depression all these years? Me and my friend don't think we can do it. We just don't think we can. And Bill wrote him back. I read this letter with my own eyeballs. He said, he wrote him back. He says, my dear fellows, I haven't experienced depression since 1955. I've been in the clear ever since. And then he went on to tell stories about how he worked with a guy named Father Ed Dowling, and he was given enough backstory that I could see that something happened there. And I followed all of that up, went to the archives in New York, and I was so fortunate because I donated those very critical pieces of information for us, they allowed me to have free run in the archives. That doesn't happen, but I believe that's why. And I found out that Bill Wilson's relationship with Father Dowling knew that Bill wasn't like Dr. Bob. When Dr. Bob got sober, all you can do is read his story. When Dr. Bob got sober, his mind normalized. And after a year of tumultuousness, the craving stayed with him for a few years, but his mind straightened out. He became like normal emotionally and mentally. Bill was like a fart in a windstorm. People always knew he's running and wish they'd go away in a hurry. It's like he was just emotional. He was an emotional mess like I was. And I'm glad I found that. But he went on to tell, what I found was Father Dowling, Ebby Thatcher was drunk. Roland Hazard was drunk. Bill's sponsor, Ebby, was drunk. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at the personal stories in the first edition of the Big Book, half of them died drunk. And there's a reason for that, but half of them died drunk, which was very interesting. And if you read it, you'd find out that all but one came from New York. So that's kind of why the Akronites thought they were more spiritual than the New Yorkers. But it really wasn't that. It's just that their personalities were so different. Bill was like, Dr. Bob was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Bill was like Mr. Hyde looking for Dr. Jekyll. It's me. You see, when I stopped drinking, I got worse. I didn't get better. And I'm starting to read living proof that validates that idea. And so Father Dowling met Bill. He went to New York after if you got a copy of the Big Book. He crawled up 3 flights of stairs with this crippling arthritis because he had to meet this man that he believed was divinely touched by God. And they became immediate friends. And they corresponded between each other in St. Louis. And what happened was Father Dowling detected Bill had depression, but he said something that you don't find in any of the DSMs. He said, Bill, I don't think you're suffering from clinical depression. I think you're suffering from spiritual depression. I think you are so self-centered, and I think you are so stuck in the realm of being blocked from the realm of the spirit that you have spiritual depression. And if you're willing, I can help you with that. And I paraphrase that. But Father Dowling would not get down there and help him until he asked for help, because Jesuits believe God is a gentleman and only comes by invitation. So he kept waiting for Bill to ask him for help, and he kept fishing. He kept plugging the waters, if you know what I mean. And finally, Bill said, Ed, I don't know what's wrong with me. And Ed says, I think I do. And that opened the floodgates. That gave Father Dowling permission to zip right in on him. And you know what I mean? We sponsors do that sometimes. And so Father Dowling says, Bill, how about you let me take you through those 12 steps of yours? And I'll add some things in there, which are in the 12 and 12. I'll add some components, primarily step 4, step 8, step 10, 11, and 12. I'll add some components that I think will help with your spiritual depression. And that's what Bill did from 1947 to 1949. He took the 12 steps with Father Dowling. And what he didn't know was during this period of time, Father Dowling, the academic Jesuit, is watching Bill, and he's notating Bill's progress. And so he got this stack of notes that at the end of this in 1949, Dowling gave all these notes back to Bill. And then Bill, and I think his name is Tom, Bill took those notes, and that's where the 12-step essays came from. And that shook me to my timbers. And Father Dowling had Bill, and this, now I want to go to that paragraph that I wanted to topic. As beginners in meditation, we might now reread this prayer several times very slowly, savoring every word and trying to take in the deep meaning of each phrase and idea. It's interesting to note that Father Dowling had Bill take, there's 12 sentences in the prayer of St. Francis, and then 2 closing statements. But he had Bill take 1 sentence a day because his racing mind would not sit still just because somebody told him he should sit still. He couldn't quiet his mind on his, if he could quiet his mind, if I could quiet my mind, I wouldn't need you guys. I wouldn't need this program if I could quiet my mind on my own. And so what Father Dowling did was he gave Bill the prayer of St. Francis, because the prayer of St. Francis is more than a prayer, it's a petition. And St. Francis of Assisi was not an alcoholic, but he was going through the emotional merry-go-round, if you will. And what he did was those words came into Assisi's head. They were a petition. God, make me this way. Because he believed if he could live this way, that this terrible depression he was in would work. And you know what? It did work. That's why the prayer, it became a prayer, if you will, as opposed to just being called a petition. I like the petition. It takes the religiosity out of that statement, but it's the prayer of St. Francis. And if you read the prayer of St. Francis, as we do on, what is it? Where'd it go? Page 99. As you read, Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. That's one sentence. I've been doing this now for 35 years. I've got a little system that I use. I do all 12 sentences. Today, I'm actually on sentence 2, hatred, love. Where there's hatred, let me bring love. And then I bring the principle, hope, honesty, hope. Principle number 2 of the Oxford group, hope. I bring that into my meditation. And then Bill Wilson, he also gave Bill the Desiderata to use. There's 12 paragraphs in the Desiderata. And so what Bill would do is he'd take one sentence of the prayer of St. Francis, and I like to say line for our cocaine friends, they kind of cracks them up, if pun intended. One sentence a day and one paragraph of the prayer of St. Francis. And I throw in there a tradition of the day. And so when I get up in the morning, I take the prayer of St. Francis, and I take, like this morning when I got up, I had to leave my house at 5:15 a.m. to go to Covina for a reason. And so I had to get up. I didn't have to. I got to get up earlier because I'm not safe unless I do even 45 years, 6 months, and 22 days, newcomer, I still need to do this to make sure I'm centered and balanced in this work. See, there's all kinds of prayer and meditation out there, but it's not designed specifically to arrest the racing mind and the spiritual malady that I suffer from with alcoholism. You see, Father Dowling gave Bill a petition that is designed specifically to slow the racing mind down, to meet the person where they are. And that's my experience. And so I've been doing that prayer, like I said, for 35 years of my sobriety. And here's what's happened. It's like yesterday I was on Instrument of Peace, which means, can I go one day, just one day, and be an instrument of peace? Folks, I wasn't an instrument of peace. I was a weapon of war. I was just a maniac. Dare I say, I didn't mean to be. I just didn't have any ability not to be that way. Has anybody ever felt that way, hopeless, that you're never going to be able to get well? I remember when Tom Brady Jr. from Charlotte, North Carolina, he was one of the first speakers I heard the weekend of my 17th day of sobriety. And he was speaking Friday night, and he said, newcomers, I got bad news. We don't get well here. And I looked at my self-appointed sponsor and thought, I knew it was a scam. What am I doing here if we don't get well? And then as he lured me in, he says, we have an opportunity to get weller than well. We have an opportunity to get weller than well. And they said, let me explain that. The earth people, them people we often suggest may not be as spiritual as we are. You know what I mean? It's like those people, it's like they go through life. Many of them go to church, many don't. They raise their kids, they pay their bills, they get along fine, they're happy for the most part. And when they're not, they go get that professional help that actually works for them, because it's not linked to a thing called the ism factor in alcoholism, this spiritual malady thing. And it works for them. Why it doesn't work for me, I understand now. I understand because I have a spiritual malady. I came to AA with a broken spirit. Life compounded the fracture. I was diagnosed as an adult at Mayo Clinic as an adult living with fetal alcohol syndrome that never got diagnosed. And that doesn't mean anything except now I understand why I had all those terrible emotions. I wasn't mentally ill as I've been being diagnosed. I was suffering from the symptoms, the progressive symptoms of fetal alcohol syndrome that went unresolved. And what I can do now, even though the symptoms are irreversible, the 12 steps give me the power to manage them, to make sure that they don't dominate my life. And now I don't need a drink to fix them because I know that the 12 steps is going to manage them for me. And so when I go through these lines of the prayer of St. Francis, it's like, look at where there's discord, I bring harmony. I brought discord with me everywhere I went. So all I got to do is stop doing that, and I'm going to bring harmony. Where there's wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. I have a hard time forgiving anybody. How about anybody else? Does anybody else have a hard time forgiving people? I had a terrible time. I want forgiveness, but it's no good for you folks. You got to pay up. You got to pay the price, man. And so by doing those 12 sentences that way, and then starting over again and again and again and again, something happened to me. I got transformed in these 12 steps. I got transformed into a human being. I got transformed into a child of God. Imperfectly, to be sure. but I'm still transformed. And I'm not done. God's not done with me yet. I'm still being transformed, which is why I need to keep my butt tied into steps 10, 11, and 12. And that's why when I got up this morning at 3:30, I made sure I did my 11-step work before I got on that road with these crazy people out here in California. I don't know if you've ever been out here, you know what I'm talking about. If it rains here, don't drive because they're out there. They're out there. And so I want to take the last 5 minutes I got, and I want to touch on some practical experience. 225 days ago, I had an experience. I doing the 11th step, doing my prayer and meditation, and there's things about my life that I have not understood, folks. I don't know anybody else. Anybody else have a problem with being judgmental? Come on, tell the truth. Raise your hand. Don't make me be the only one. Isn't it amazing? I didn't know this, folks. I was doing a workshop out in the Palisades on the steps, as a matter of fact. And I'm a wordsmith. I look up words in the dictionary, and I've been doing that workshop now for 30 years. One word I've never looked up is judgmental. That's interesting, don't you think? And I looked it up, and it says to judge harshly. Now that don't sound very bad. That sounds kind of innocent if you ask me. So big, so I judge harshly. So what? I don't see the harm in that. I don't see what it's doing to me. And then a friend of mine who's an expert in grammar, he says, "Hey, Butler, look up the synonyms." And I said, "What's that, a virus?" I had no idea what he was talking about, synonyms. So I looked up the synonyms of judgmental, and I got a little bit of throw up in my throat, and I got sucked right in the gut. And I want you folks to know something, what I did. It was 3 weeks prior to my 45th birthday in AA. Now I want you to hear this. 3 weeks prior to my 45th birthday, I did a 45-year review of one thing. Where did my judgmental nature separate and divide me from people I care about? Where did my judgmental attitude, where did my judgmental nature separate me from God and God's kids? That inventory took several hours, folks. I got to see how when I judge you, I separate myself. That doesn't mean I don't judge people's behavior. I need to protect myself. But that doesn't mean that maybe step 4 is right. Maybe I need to look at them like they're sick people. You know, it worked in step 4, but after I got past step 4, it wasn't a big deal to me anymore. And so what happened was I accepted the challenge of trying to become non-judgmental. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, try to go 1 week without being judgmental of a human being. Try to go, and you may be non-judgmental by nature. I'm not talking to you. If you're a person like me who's got a judgmental nature, I'm talking to you. Try to go 1 week, and when you catch yourself, go like this. Oh, I could have had a V8. I mean, you know, it's like, I want you to know something. For 224 straight days now, I have almost judged people on a daily basis. And what God gave me a prayer. I am not intuitive enough to come up with this on my own. I was having a fit to be tied. I was ready to leave this group again. I was just so fed up with people. They ain't doing it right, blah, blah, blah. You know how we are, how I am, I can tell you. And I asked God for help. It's that prayer that most alcoholics have said at one time or another, God help me. And these words came into my mouth. I call it the prayer of tolerance. Please, Lord, help me to believe that this person is doing their very level best at this precise moment in time. God save me from being angry, critical, or judgmental. Thy will be done. And then I say the serenity prayer. There's days where I say that thing 1,000 times over the past 224 days. And I want you to know something. There's as much power in being non-judgmental as there is in humility. I never had any idea what damage it was doing to me. See, I'll look at it when it's hurting me. When it's hurting you, I'm not so quick to look at it. But when I did my inventory and found out how it was hurting me, I don't want to be that way anymore. So that's at 45 years. So a newcomer might say, well, it took you that long? Listen, I got to tell you something. It happens when it happens. You see when you see, and you hear when you're here. And so for 224 straight days and nights now, and I got to tell you, there's a lot of red meat out there in the world of AA. There's always somebody worthy of judgment, I have to tell you, in my opinion. But you know what? And you know what's hardest? You know what the hardest person is not to judge? Is the one I know is judging me. I mean, I want to judge the judgers. I mean, but that still is a violation of my challenge. And so for the past 224 days, I've accepted the challenge. I broke my hip on December 30th. I just got diagnosed with high blood pressure. I got taken to the hospital on Tuesday. My blood pressure is 208 over 108. They said I got there just ahead of a stroke. Now I'm on a low sodium diet, for God's sake. What do you mean? Everything's got sodium in it. How am I going to eat? I mean, I almost jumped right into the pool of self-pity. And it's like, but the question is, do I want to live? And then he says, no caffeine. I said, shoot me. Oh my God. I should have stock in Starbucks. But you know what? I accepted the challenge. And you know what? I didn't judge myself. There's the key. Because I'm trying not to judge other people, I found a way of freeing myself from judging me. And all of this has come out of taking that one sentence a day from the prayer of St. Francis, one day after another, after another, after another. I have 5 minutes left. Forgot I had set 35-minute warning. So I just want to share that with you folks. I didn't think that my frame of mind was possible. You know, I had 21 diagnoses. I'm not proud of this. You know, there is no gap between a feeling and action in my life. I'm like ready, fire, aim. And then it's like I get this feeling, I do it, and then I think I shouldn't have done it. And then I do it again to make sure I shouldn't have done it. It's like madness going on in here. How do I stop this? Therapy hasn't fixed it. They mean well, they tried, but it didn't solve it. And here I am, don't need any therapy. This is not a public opinion poll. I don't need any therapy. I don't need any pills. I haven't needed them since I was 27. I've gotten relief in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, a lot of people are getting confused these days, but I want to take my last 5 minutes to talk about this. There's a lot of confusion going around AA right now. And I'm not bagging on treatment centers or sober living, but I'm gonna tell you, their program is short-lived. It's not designed for long-term recovery. And it's like, here's what's happening. A lot of people are coming to us with a head full of science, but their heart is tore up. They're broke. Their spirit is broken. They've got this information that has nothing to do with Alcoholics Anonymous at all. And you know, folks, if you're new, I want to share something with you. This is bad news. Scientifically, AA shouldn't work, should it? Scientifically, it shouldn't work. How can this work? There's no experts in here. A lot of us think we are, but there's no experts here. We're all lay persons. AA shouldn't work. There's no blood test. There's no x-ray. There's no biopsy. There's nothing concrete that science can label and say, yes, this is it. They can only guess. They can only suggest because of how much you drink. But you know what? What about those people who don't drink very much? You see, it's not about how much you drink. It's not about how much I drank. It's not how long I drank. It's what happened to me when I drank. And that sweet music of silence in my head it made the price of alcohol worthwhile. I like to say alcohol saved my life at the cost of my life. And I couldn't see that because in the bubble of trying to find out what I could do about this thing that I didn't understand. I'm so glad that Bill and Bob did not shirk their God-given responsibilities. I'm glad that the anchor Bob and the loose spirit Bill, I'm glad they hung in there and carried this message and didn't quit. A lot of people have come along in the past 5,000 years of recorded history and tried to find a way to solve our dilemma. They've tried every kind of approach, religious, medical, scientific, and they failed for one reason or another. We are beholden to the idea that we have been blessed with a gift, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that Bill called that gift the gift of faith. And I have something to have faith in. And it's all centered around, I take steps 10, 11, and 12 together. They're a unit. And you know, it's like, can I do this in 3 minutes? I think I can. I've discovered that there are 3 phases of 12-step development. For those of you that are new, you might wonder where you are. There are 3 phases are desperation, restoration, and transformation. The first phase, desperation, steps 1, 2, and 3, because there's no way I would have taken steps 1, 2, and 3 if I wasn't desperate. I would have mouthed them. I would have talked about them. But if I wasn't desperate, I never would have took them. So when someone's new, they come to me with desperation, I take advantage of that desperation and get them into steps 1, 2, and 3. Steps 4 through 9 are what we call the restoration phase. And newcomer, I want you to hear this. There's a duality to restoration, being restored to soundness of mind. The first one is I get to get restored to soundness of mind where alcohol is concerned. I realize that there is no human way I will ever be able to drink alcohol safely. Safely. I can't drink safely. There's no scientific pill they can give me that will enable me to drink safely and not develop the obsession for the effect produced by alcohol. And that's the one. So I've been restored to soundness of mind. The second one is being restored. How many of us want a second chance at life? Raise your hand. How many of us want that second chance at life? How many of us have such a terrible life? I have a terrible history. I hurt so many people. I did terrible things out there in the madness of my mind. And I want a second chance. I want to be restored to that clean sheet that God made us all. What he intended for us at birth to be these perfect little children. He had this design, the Creator did. And so this is my chance to be restored to that very spot by doing steps 4 through 9, taking my inventory and making the amends and cleaning up my past. I have a chance to get rid of all that baggage, and the baggage that I can't get rid of for one reason or another will be made peace with. And I want you to know that I've been restored to soundness of mind where that's concerned. And step 10 helps me keep it clean when I dirty it up, because I am going to do that. I'm a human being. I'm going to make mistakes. I just try not to make preconceived decisions on hurting people, places, or things. And the transformation phase, steps 10, 11, and 12. Now that I've been restored to soundness of mind, where not only alcohol is concerned, but where life is concerned, now through steps 10, 11, and 12, I make myself available to be transformed. And I can't do the transforming, and only God can. And we got those 3 beautiful steps, 10, 11, and 12, that transformation takes place in the process, in the experience of taking those steps. And when I hear someone relapse, I know for sure that they are not living in steps 10, 11, and 12. I know that for a fact. There's no doubt about that. So I want to leave you with the last 10 seconds to say this. I wish you all well. I hope everybody in this meeting stays sober one day at a time and finds that happy, joyous, and free, and gets that goal of AA, the goal of AA, victory over alcohol and freedom from bondage of self. I'm done. Thank you.
But mute yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ron. I'm an alcoholic. And thank you so much, Spons. That is such a great share. And, one of the things that really helped me, and I just love for you to share it with this group, was that, when I found you and I found our sponsorship family, is that chapter 4, I was really confused about that, because I didn't see myself as agnostic. I've got a very beautiful spirituality with sweat lodges and, and the creator and the ceremonies, the dances, the powwows that we do. And yet it was the one thing that kept me blocked from, and why I was in bondage, to recognizing that I had an agnostic inclination. And I just think I've been sharing it with other people, and that I was also finding out that, wow, like I never saw that before. So if you could elaborate on that for us, that would be really great.
Okay, the question is, why elaborate on chapter 4? We agnostics. I'm not agnostic. I believe in God. I love God, but I was confused by what the context of that was. I don't know if any of you are like me, but I get an idea and I don't need context. I just either dismiss it or accept it, one or the other. I didn't read chapter 4 when I was new, because I'm a Christian. And I thought if I read that chapter, God might think I've lost faith. So I didn't want to risk reading that chapter. I mean, that sounds crazy, but it's true. And finally, my sponsor got me to read that chapter, and I found the ism factor in chapter 4. The bedevilments is how I live without a drink. The bedevilments. That's the story of my life. But there's 2 things in there where Bill wrote agnostic inclination and agnostic temperament. And what we discovered from the men and women of religion is that some people that have a broken spirit, they will be inclined. What is agnosticism? There's 4 major symptoms of agnosticism, and here's what they are. Chronic self-doubt. Anybody else ever plagued with chronic self-doubt? Just have no faith in yourself, no belief in yourself. I ain't talking about egoism and arrogance. I'm talking about deep down, no real self-respect, self-faith, belief in oneself. I never believed in myself. I always need everybody's approval. If you're an approval seeker and a people pleaser, I'm talking about you too, because that's part of the thing. And what I discovered was, I wake up every morning, I go to bed. I'll go to bed tonight in good spirits. I can promise you that, unless something throws me for a curve. But if it does, I'll do my 10 step. But I'll go to bed, but I might wake up feeling bad. I may wake up full of doubt, wondering what's going on, or is this ever going to end? I may wake up like that because I'm inclined that way. I've got this dark and negative nature. The book even talks about that we have we lived in the dark and negative side of our nature, and we substituted negative for positive thinking. Now, it doesn't happen very often for me anymore, but there are mornings where I'll wake up and I just won't feel good. There's something doesn't feel right. And then I know what it is. It's that agnostic inclination, that thing that goes with a broken spirit. But for the most part, my spirit's been healed. There's no cure for alcoholism, but the broken spirit can be healed here. And I'm so glad to know that, because I believe mine is. But this thing about agnostic inclination, I'm inclined to doubt myself. I'm inclined to doubt you. I'm inclined to judge you, to make judgments. And so what happened is when I began to do 10 steps on that, what happened is I realized that if I just get up, sit down and do my 11th step, and realize that not intellectualize God, not to be what Bill talked about was spiritually intoxicated or full of spiritual make-believe, but to just understand, yes, God is everything or God is nothing. God is everything. Okay. But God designed us to be able to answer each other's questions. You see, my sponsor had a saying about turning your will over to God, about God being everything. I said, well, maybe God will pay my child support. I said, yeah, and he'll soon send the sheriff too. When I don't pay it. It's like many of my sponsees, they say things that they don't know is helping me. That's God's handiwork. Had I not sponsored them in the moment we were in, I would have never gotten that message from them that I needed to hear. And it's like, so my agnostic temperament, how does that come out? I've got a temper that flares just like this. It's right out there. For the most part, that's gone away. And by the way, I haven't gone looking for it either. Wherever it's at, I hope it'll stay there. But it's still there. Alcoholism has no cure. But as far as my spirit goes, and let me share this with you, one more thing related to agnostic. This is a spiritual malady. And I never did look up the word spirit for the symptom. Spirit is defined to embody the qualities of courage, energy, and determination, and have the needed power present to assert them extemporaneously. You know what? I've never been able to finish anything prior to AA. I've always been a loose cannon. It's like I made many decisions and never followed through on most of them. I didn't have the courage to stand up in the face of opposition. I'd get an idea and I didn't have the courage to see it through. I had a chance to be a professional baseball player until I hit an umpire with a baseball bat. I had a chance at a career, but I couldn't hold my temper. I had no power to hold my temper. I had no impulse control. And now I have gained all those things through this. And so even though I'm not agnostic, I still have that inclination. I still have that temperament, but step 11 is what tempers it. That's all I got to say about that.
Beautiful, thank you. Paul A., please come on up and unmute yourself.
Thanks, Wayne, for the great share. It rang a lot of bells for me, particularly with the description of alcoholism given to me by a doctor before I got sober, and he was describing all the symptoms, and it never got through to me. I've been 43 years sober last Thursday, and it was very interesting also to hear about your history of Father Dowling. I think that was fascinating. What I wanted to ask was, I meditate in the morning, and I'm going to try what you said, was trying one phrase from the petition of St. Francis. What do you do to still your mind? I wander all over the place and go everywhere else except where I'm supposed to be, and that is meditating on whatever I'm meditating on. Can you shed some light on that?
What do I do to pause, you mean?
Now, what do you do to still your mind? When your mind, I meditate in the morning, and I start thinking about all sorts of things that are so important, and they're not. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which is meditating on the petition of St. Francis.
Well, here's what I do, Paul. I got it. Here's what I do, because I set a timer for 5 minutes, because I'm just not going to sit there for an hour. I'm just not going to. That's not me. I set a timer for 5 minutes, and what I do is I reread the sentences of the prayer of St. Francis and the paragraphs of Desiderata. I just keep reading those, and that reading stills my mind. It's like, if you want to go to sleep at night, read the big book. We all know that joke. But because my mind used to race so bad, I could not, and by the way, I couldn't keep one thought in my head. I had 2 or 3 or 4. And when people say you can't have 2 thoughts at the same time, they have not visited my neighborhood. I'll tell you that right now. But what I'll do is I'll focus on the lines of the prayer of St. Francis before I start. I'll read the prayer over and over again. I'll read the 12 paragraphs of the Desiderata over and over again. And And that is what stills my mind in the moment. My mind might not ever get completely quiet, but it's focused on something productive. And I have found that that works for me. And now I find that when I'm out and about and I don't have access to my notes.
Thank you for that.
What?
I said, thank you for that.
You're welcome, Paul.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Allison, please come on up and mute yourself.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Allison. I am an alcoholic. And it's great to be here with everyone. Thank you, Spons. I enjoyed that so much. And it just takes me back to when I met you when I was 2.5 years sober going to AA. I didn't have a solution in my life. I was not drinking, but I kept wondering, like you described tonight, what's wrong with me? And I had that racing mind. I was making a lot of bad decisions, although I wasn't drinking any longer. And you introduced me to the program of AA in a way that I had not heard it before, including, and as time went on, including best practice and discipline of practicing the 11th step in my life. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is you had talked to me about this letter that Bill Wilson that had been published in Language of the Heart called Emotional Sobriety, The Next Frontier. And I've realized over time how much I relate to looking at faulty power sources outside of myself. And I just wondered if you would expand on that
On what?
letter and what it means.
On the letter itself?
Yeah, and how that relates to, I know for me, it's been really powerful in my sobriety.
Well, I suggest you guys Google Emotional Sobriety, The Next Frontier, and you'll get that letter and read that for yourself. That was Bill's response to the idea of emotional sobriety, which is what Father Dowling led him into. And he talks about how miserable he was in that 3-page letter. That was one of the motivational things behind me. I found that it was a 2-page article that was in the Grapevine in 1958, but it was Bill's synopsis of what came out of that work with Father Ed Dowling. It's called Emotional Sobriety, The Next Frontier. And it'll be self-explanatory when you read it. It's interesting that Bill was able to make that notation. It doesn't get talked about too much. Not too many people review that. A lot of people make fun of the idea of emotional sobriety. I mean, they do. I don't know about where you are, but a lot of people kind of chuckle at the idea of emotional sobriety. But Bill said we're in a spiritual kindergarten, and the next frontier is emotional sobriety. Because if you're an alcoholic of my type, I didn't have emotional sobriety. I didn't have emotional balance on the Natch. Anybody relate to that? Anybody else have imbalanced emotions? I mean, come on, raise your hand, tell the truth. I mean, it's not that you're not, but man, they tried to medicate my emotions out of me. I was court ordered to take medication for the rest of my life. I'll put that up. I started telling you about that. Then I decided not to. Now I'm going to change my mind. My last arrest and institutionalization at the Watertown Insane Asylum was my diagnosis was psychopath with homicidal tendencies. And the only way they let me out 6 months later is if I agreed to take medication for the rest of my life. And I got out because I made that agreement. I ain't stupid. I might be alcoholic, but I ain't dumb. I never did take the medication. Today they would have forced my hand, but that was my last diagnosis. They said there's no fix for that. The truth of the matter is it's called emotional sobriety. That's the workshop that I've been doing for 30 years. I've been doing a workshop on the 12 steps of emotional sobriety. So.
That's a great question, Allison. Calvin, come on up. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name's Calvin. I'm an alcoholic. Wayne, thank you so much, man. What a good message. You said so many things that touched me, man. And I was thinking about, when you talked about being in that psychiatrist's office and he had all them pills and stuff, and you got relief before you took the pills. You got relief right there. And I thought about it's like when I got a toothache and I go to the dentist and I get relief when I'm in the dentist and I'm in the waiting room. I ain't getting in the chair yet and my tooth stopped hurting. And I think about that same scenario when it comes to the world of the spirit. And I think when you were saying that, if you could just give me a little bit on that. And I was thinking about, I read the Soul of Sponsorship too. I read that, and I read when Father Dowling came up them stairs and he was a broken man. And together, Bill was broken because Bill was in a depression, and then two broken souls locked up, man. And when you talked about it perfectly, You know, when I hear that, it made me cry when I hear them talk about that, when I heard that in that book. And it's just amazing stuff, man. And after that night, when Father Downing left, it was a snowy, sleety night. Bill slept for the first time in many months. And that's what you talked about tonight. I mean, what a message, man. My ears was open, Wayne. My ears was open. And I'm high energy myself, but meditation has calmed me down. It has worked for me. But I found out with my meditation, what works for me is to not stop doing it. To not stop doing the consistency of it. So, man, just I want to say thank you. But like I said, just thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. Wonderful. Tricia, come on up. Please unmute yourself.
Hi all, Trisha, alcoholic. Thank you for the person that invited me, and thank everyone for their service, and Wayne for that great share. I don't really know if I have much of a question. I just kind of wanted to make a comment. Like, it was very comforting to hear that your story, basically, because I have a similar experience, I'd always have like these episodes. I would go talk to a psychiatrist for an hour, typically in like an institution kind of situation. And it was always, I was depressed, or I was this, or I was that. And what's interesting to hear is, not that I've really seeked out a lot of spiritual counseling or anything, but it was always, I had this, or I had that, or this, that, and the third. I would take medication for a little while. It never helped me personally. And what I found that whenever I came to AA is that my spiritual depression, so to speak, is a formation of my character defects, essentially. And I'm just learning, I'm about to come up on I am 5 months sober, actually, a couple of days ago, now that I realize it. But I'm just realizing, that this, spiritual malady is more than I ever thought it would be. And, it's just crazy to think that. So I just wanted to thank you for sharing that, because I haven't heard anybody share it that deep or in depth, I should say. I guess my question would be, because I experienced this a few weeks ago, I was doing my morning step work, basically. And I kind of got into a point where I kind of lost that habit, and I stopped praying in the morning, and I felt myself getting this feeling of like, well, things aren't going well for me. I don't even want to pray. I just want to know if you've had those feelings before, and if it hasn't been a while, how do I avoid that if I can? Thank you.
Avoid moments of not wanting to pray.
Mm-hmm. Like,
Well,
I know it doesn't make sense.
No, it does make sense. I don't think I can avoid them. All I can do is set them aside when they show up. It's like the first thought that pops into my head. I can't do nothing about that first thought. That first thought gets in there. I have no control over it. Did anybody else experience that, where you get it? The thought comes in from nowhere. My job is to get to the second and third thought as fast as I can to make sure I don't do something stupid. It's like my feelings. When I feel something, I don't trust my feelings right up. Well, I do now, but back in your days, I didn't trust my feelings because my feelings were wonky. And it's like I said, I'm driven by emotion, and I made emotional decisions, and they almost always backfired. And so what I can share with you is those times where this presents itself will be less and less and less as we go along. That's my experience. None of it stopped on the dime. Everything that I'm sharing about happened over a period of days, weeks, months, and years, one day at a time, just by being persistent, having perseverance, and not quitting, not no matter what, not quitting. And so I think that's probably going to continue to happen, but it's like everything else. My defects of character are still here. They didn't go anywhere. They're in storage right now, but they're still there, and they can pop their little beady heads out anytime they want. My job is to sidestep them. My job is to put them back in the box, but they're going to rear their ugly heads. That's human nature. I think most human beings go through that at some time in their life. Doubt and fear, all the stuff that we have. They just don't have them to the levels that people like me and you have. That answer your question? I want to share one thing before Jennifer. You know, here's something I learned. We hear a lot about disease because, you know, the treatment professionals have made alcoholism a disease, and many of us have bought into it. Our book still says allergy obsession plus underlying soul sickness. And the only reason I point that out is, you know, the Alcoholics Anonymous, here's a critical factor that has to do with steps 10, 11, and 12. Alcoholics Anonymous is not designed to treat disease of any kind, because if it was, cancer patients would line every room and get a sponsor and do everything we do. People with tuberculosis, diabetes, people with real biological organic disease would fill our halls if all they had to do is get a sponsor, do some prayer and meditating, and work 12 steps. We're not designed to any way treat a disease. But if you look closely at the inner workings of Alcoholics Anonymous, what we are perfectly designed to do is to resolve the mental and emotional disorders linked to a spiritual malady. That's what AA is designed perfectly to do if I'm willing to take the actions. It's like in how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. How many of you, like me, didn't notice that path is not plural? That path is not plural. The AA path, our journey, there's 111 journeys in this room right now. What they do in the airlines, there's 111 souls in this meeting. That means there's 111 journeys. But be it alcoholic, we have one path. And that path is laid out in AA Comes of Age, our history book. And the application of that path is the 12 steps. It's important to know that, because many of us get diverted into all kinds of different ideas about how to recover that have nothing to do with AA. But that path is singular. And then it goes on in the next sentence to say, those who do not recover, the people who slip, who relapse, who die, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to our simple program. And the importance here is, yes, God is everything in my mind, but I still need a sponsor, because I can manipulate God, believe it or not. I can manipulate the messages I think I get from God. So I need a sponsor whose objectivity has the power to overrule my subjectivity, because I promise you, I will always err on the side of Wayne. And my sponsor is objective in mind. He doesn't want anything from me except my growth and development. And so I trust his objectivity. And my subjectivity can still get me in trouble even after all these years, one day at a time. I'll stop there with that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tricia. Great question. Jennifer B., come on up. Please unmute yourself.
Thanks, Philip. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for calling on me, Philip. Thank you, Spons, for a great talk on the 11th step. It's always great to hear you. And what I was thinking about, I've thought about many things, but one of the things that really stood out to me is about spiritual intoxication and spiritual make-believe, and how I have over the years identified that I can easily, very easily drift off into that by reading either self-help books or the Bible or whatever the case may be. And even after time of recognizing that I have a tendency to drift off into that, I still am susceptible. AA's given me a foundation to be able to enjoy my faith, and I do. And I just am aware that I need to be careful of that. And the other thing that stood out to me is what you were talking about just now too, about scientifically AA shouldn't work. And I hadn't actually ever heard it that way, but that makes complete sense, because none of us here, I mean, we might be doctors like in our profession field, but within AA, we're not doctors, we're not diagnosing, we're not therapy people, you know, we're alcoholics that when you said the two of us get together, it's 1 + 1 = 3, and we're having a spiritual powers happening, not a human power. And I identify so strongly with that, because the results that I'm experiencing now in my life, all the years that you've taken the time to work with me through all of that manipulation, right? Remember all those years?
Yes, I do.
I'm finally, you know, in the past, I'd say 12 to 18 months, really experiencing a complete freedom from that. I continuously am impressed by the results that I get from living AA as a way of life. And I'm really grateful for that. Thank you, Spons. And The question that I have, I heard you say, anything that separates me or divides me defeats me. Could you tell us more about that and what you mean by that?
Well, it says anything that has the power to separate or divide me has the power to defeat me. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to. So I want to make that clear. Not, because I can go a long time separate myself from people and not drink. But after a time, it's going to accumulate and it has the power to defeat me. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say I'm an alcoholic and a addict. That separates me from the alcoholic people in the room, makes me different. And anything makes me different sets me up for a drink. And so what I'm going to be aware of is what is it and how do I do the things that separate me from, do I look for similarities, or do I look for things that differentiate me? The ego is a very fragile thing with we human beings, I believe. There's a reason why it's called egoism, that ism factor that we deal with in alcoholics. And if you're interested, ism, I have registered as internal spiritual maladjustment. So egoism is to be internally maladjusted spiritually. And from there, I separate myself from God. God doesn't separate himself from me, and I run on self-will. And where it talks about I can't catch the phrase right now. I can't pull it up. Maybe I'll get back to it. But I want to get it now. The soil in which it is tilled. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problem. That immediately tells me that I'm separated from God, that I'm not in his perfect idea. I'm not living in God's will. I'm living in Wayne's will. And one of the reasons I found for that for me is I've never really believed or known what God's will is for me. Anybody else? How many of us have wondered what's God's will? It's like I have known for 35 years in my heart of hearts what God's will is for me. I haven't questioned it one time. I've known it just like it happened yesterday. But I realized step 12 for me is an explanation of God's will. Carry this message to alcoholics. I believe that's God's will for me. And practice these principles in all my affairs. That lays out the whole cauldron of the map of what it means to live God's will. And so when I'm actually trying to practice these principles in all my affairs, public and private, when I'm doing God's will, I don't have to be concerned so much about that, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Wonderful question. Sherry Levy, come on up. Please unmute yourself.
Hey guys, hi everybody. Sherry Levy, alcoholic. Thank you to the service team for this meeting. So appreciated. Wayne, it's great to see you. You sound great as always. I was curious, you mentioned the 12-step of emotional sobriety workshop. Are you Zooming at all with that?
No, there's too much to it to do that.
Okay. Not even possible? Because there was a couple people on here who asked about it. Well, not a couple. I plus one make three.
I have done shorter versions of it, but see, I've got PowerPoint slides, and there's a lot to my workshop that just Zoom isn't practical.
Okay.
And I walk around a lot, and I wouldn't be able to do that because of the camera. I would have to stay. I'm not Italian, but you might mistake me for that. I mean, I'm very emotive. I use that to get people's attention. And I tried to do one on Zoom, and I just couldn't do it because, first of all, you got to hire a cameraman to follow me around to Zoom to people. So it just wouldn't work. But I've done short versions of it. It's like I've done an hour-and-a-half talk on emotional sobriety. I've done an hour-and-a-half talk on how steps 1, 2, and 3 relate. But I haven't done my actual emotional sobriety workshop on Zoom, and I probably won't.
Okay.
But I'm happy to come to your area if you want me to.
What's that?
I'm happy to come to your area and do one if that's what you want.
Okay. Okay. And the other question I had on this meeting, since it is an 11-step meeting, they allow outside literature. So I just wondered, do you have any favorite books over the years that are outside of AA literature?
Yes, I use Our Daily Bread every day. The Upper Room, I read those. But here's my thing, and I like the Bible. Let me share something that's very interesting. A while back, I was one of the visiting clergy. They had a gathering of ministers, clergy, nuns, priests, blah blah blah, 400. and it was a weekend about why is it that this AA thing works and church doesn't? And I was one of the 5 presenters, and I was last. And this wasn't something that was open to the public. And I was last. And I thought, how am I going to get their attention? So I took a big book and a Bible up to the dais, up to the pulpit. And I held the Bible up and I said, folks, this is not a treatment for alcoholism. And you could have heard a pin drop that offended, that statement offended the sensibilities of many of the clergy that were there. And then I held the big book up and I said this, and they knew what that was. We've been talking about it for the whole week. And I said, the big book is not a treatment for alcoholism. And that confused them. I said, it's not a treatment for alcoholism. It's a way of life. Just like that Bible is a way of life for people who live by that. The big book is a way of life for people that have a mindset different than that. That makes sense?
Mhm.
And I've lost track of your original question.
That's okay.
No, what was it?
Just about the outside literature.
Oh, well, yeah. So I read the Bible personally, but here's what I want to say about that. I don't read any outside literature before I do my AA work. I don't use it in place of, I use it in support of. And I think a lot of people have drifted away from AA because they start using that literature in place of AA. Like they start doing activities in place of AA meetings. And pretty soon they've drifted and gone. So yeah, I'm big on reading. I love inspirational things, folks. I write a lot of inspirational stuff for myself. I like writing poetry. A lot of my poetry has to do with spirituality, and it gives me comfort and peace. But I don't do that until I've done my AA work first. I never do it in place of, only in support of.